All right, so welcome to part three of today's lecture series on domestic decoration. This is just a quick tour of a house in Pompeii that tends towards the grander side of things and a house in Herculaneum that tends towards the humbler side of things to give you some idea of the range of preserved households in these areas. Um, to begin with Pompeii, I'm going to introduce you to the House of the Menander. And this is located in Region 1, sort of close to the amphitheater and a very large gymnasium, as well as some vineyards down at this end. Um, and the house, as you can see from its plan, you can see the sort of typical house core here, and then it has expanded out into adjoining properties over time. So the owners must have sort of bought out adjoining properties or parts of adjoining properties to add on to make this house a little bit larger than the average in Pompeii. So to take a quick tour through the way that the house is organized, you might enter off the street here through this narrow fauces or vestibule into the atrium with its impluvium and compluvium ceiling, and then the tablinum, the sort of household office behind, with other rooms to the side, either for workspaces, storage spaces, or meeting spaces, or even bedrooms. Then back here through a pretty narrow hallway is a very large peristyle garden with an interior sort of wall separating the inner garden area from the walkway around it. And then it has another suite over on this side of entertainment spaces, storage areas, a kitchen garden and kitchen complex. So lots of sort of serving areas and activity spaces for running the household. And then on this side, we see a small bath complex, which is built into the household as well. So we have this sort of sprawling plan, but still centered on this courtyard area and with the public facing atrium at the front of the house facing the street. So with the House of the Menander, what we will see as we look through some of the areas of the house, here is a view from the sort of vestibule area through the atrium into that rear peristyle garden. And what you can see is that the atrium itself is built with some elements that evoke public architecture, like these columns flanking the tablinum on either side. And then we have really brightly colored, lavish, nicely done wall paintings all around. And then this long, elongated view into the rear garden that actually sort of enhances just how large the space is and how it looks like there are rooms that sort of continue off into the distance on the other side of the peristyle as well to sort of enhance the patrons' visual or visible control over their environment and their sort of power and wealth at the same time. If we go back for a second and look at the plan, you can see that there's this very long visual axis that we're looking at, traced all the way through the atrium, through the tablinum, and it goes actually back a little bit off center in the peristyle and then hits this niche at the rear. And so it looks like it's a perfectly symmetrical view, except that actually the house is shifted a little bit on axis. And what we see at the very end of that view is this niche area here, which includes the portrait for which the house is named of the comedian Menander. So a portrait of a poet forming part of the focal point of both your initial visual access from entering the house and also of this courtyard area that sort of is at the heart of the more intimate entertainment spaces, the grand private spaces of the household. Move on. Here you can see a close-up of that close-up of Menander here, of the portrait of Menander at the rear. And either side of the portrait niche, which is square, are these round niches, which have scenes of a landscape, right? So continuing that sort of visual line towards the outdoors, even illusionistically through the wall paintings of the courtyard. In another niche here, you can see this is two views, it's a little hard to see, a more distant view where you can see these wall paintings that continue. It's very tough to tell, but have trees moving out into the distance, similar to that second style of painting that we saw at Aplantis, where you have the views through architectural frames into the distance, into a distant garden or shrine space. And then we have an actual household shrine, which you can see a little more closely here, with its statues and statuettes still inside. They were found in situ after the eruption. So that is also off of this courtyard area connected to this outdoor space. And then you can see this is just the wall, the low wall of the peristyle around the central garden. And even here we see that sort of commitment to emphasizing the connection with the outdoors and elongating the sort of view of the garden by actually representing plants on the exterior walls of the garden as well to enhance that sort of view. And although it's difficult to see here, you can also see these columns, which are fluted. Again, that sort of hearkening towards a public space, or at least a very elite space with its monumentality, these monumental columns to hold it up. So if we look back at the plan here, just briefly, the only things that we have actually looked at to this point are here, where that lararium niche is, these niches here, and this wall. So you can only imagine, if you want to go explore this house further, that there is plenty more artwork to see and plenty more to learn about what is on the walls and also the floors here. But I just want to give you a taste. So moving into our second taste, we're going to go visit Herculaneum. There we go. Visit Herculaneum. So Pompeii is located on the Bay of Naples, as you can see, and then Herculaneum is just located a little bit further north on the Bay of Naples. So when Mount Vesuvius erupted, both of these cities were destroyed, but they were destroyed by different elements of the eruption, which led to different preservation conditions at each. So Pompeii was mostly destroyed by pumice, ash, and rockfall. And then Herculaneum was destroyed by sort of boiling gas and mud flows called pyroclastic flows that came down from Mount Vesuvius and buried the town and actually carbonized a lot of organic matter like food, rope, wooden construction materials. And so that brings me to the house that I want to introduce you to at Herculaneum, which is located here in Insula 3. And it is called the House of Opus Criticum. Opus Criticum is the construction method that was used to create this building, based on the wooden lattice work that is then filled in with stones, in this case opus incertum, which are haphazardly stacked stones. So this construction method is cheaper than many others and also usually less durable than other construction methods used in domestic space. It was also very common. And here we can see in this house, if you look briefly at the plan, it does not seem to quite follow that usual atrium style plan that we're probably getting used to seeing now. Instead, we have this narrow entryway, a staircase leading up to a separate apartment above, and then we have a back courtyard with rooms off to the side, and then another staircase which leads up to further apartments and then rooms in the back. So multiple apartments seem to have been part of this building, and it seems more, it doesn't follow the plan of, say, the Ossian Insula that we saw before, but it seems to have been a multi-family dwelling. So to look at what it looked like from the street, looking up the street, you can see that there are doors on the balcony leading inwards. So this house fronts a little bit more on the street than some of the townhouses that we've seen so far, both Greek and Roman. And that seems to have enabled the proprietors of the house to have these multiple apartments, right? So you can have sort of separate entrances to rooms and consolidate conserve space a little bit better, to have more areas for people to dwell within. Here's a view just standing up on that balcony and looking out over the street. And then still, one thing that is really continuous here is that at the heart of the household, we have an interior courtyard. Now, this is nowhere near as grand as the House of the Menanders Paris-style garden, but we do have this low-walled area with a bed. And then we have windows from the upper story apartments looking onto the courtyard, as well as windows into these lower story rooms. So maintaining that value for the outdoor space at the heart of the house, for the use of its natural lighting and its air circulation, even in these multifamily households in this case. So this is, as you can see, this axiometric view. And so I'm going to briefly take you up into these two bedrooms at the top of the stairs here, so that you can see that although most of this house doesn't preserve a whole lot in the way of wall decoration and floor decoration, these upper rooms do, which is a little bit interesting. So here is one of those rooms. We have the remains of a bed frame, you can see in the carbonized wood, and then sort of lovely fourth style wall decoration with a red ground, the light sort of attenuated architectural framing, some little abstracted floral garlands and elements, and then these floating griffin figures in between to give it this, a little bit of mythological iconography thrown in for detail. In the room next door, we have more fourth style wall painting, yet again, more architectural framing schemes. And then we also have the remains of two beds and then a cabinet. And within the cabinet were found some of these sort of daily life objects. The lares, two of the lares, which are household gods, which we will be discussing more in depth next week. This is just one example of a statuette that was discovered in these cupboards. So when people are excavating these houses, whether they be grand or humble, the sort of things that we interpret as artistic objects are of a wide range. They include the architecture, the outlay of the house, furnishings if they are there, the wall and floor revetments and decorations. So all of these things kind of contribute to an overall picture of how the household was decorated by its patrons. If we then try to think back on our sort of spatial organization, with a house like this, it's a little bit less clear where the public and private and grand and humble axes lie. You might not expect a place like this without an atrium and a multifamily unit where people are living in a couple rooms at a time to have clients visiting. So we don't have that sort of grand public area. And yet some of these bedrooms are rather lushly decorated and quite beautiful. So that speaks somewhat to the values of the people living in these houses. Even some of the things that we might classify now as humbler dwellings, the time and the care is taken to create a decorative environment for the people within. So what I want you to do is to actually explore a pair of websites, and I want you just to locate and identify a house that is sort of rich in decoration, or at least interesting to you in some way using these websites. So here you can see this is what AD79 looks like. And if you want to look at any of the houses, you can click on, say, Region 1, and then let's look at House Insula 6 here, and then this House of the Chai. So, and then you can explore photographs of the house, plans of the house, and sort of see some information about what the excavation record of the house is. And you can do the same with Pompeian pictures here if you scroll down and come into the insula. So I just want you to take some time, explore, find one house that you think is interesting, just identify it, mark it down, write which house it's going to be, and we're going to come back to it later.